he sighed. What did they know about toys anyway?
"Hey, mister."
Drew cracked one eye open and caught a little hand tugging on his sweater. Great. The little enemy wanted to engage in contact. A small girl who looked around 7 or 8 had her hand on his arm, eyes glued on him. Even though his job as a regional vice president for JDL Toys could give Santa a run for his money, he still hadn't warmed up to the little people and wasn't quite sure he ever would. Certainly not after the latest stunt they'd pulled, rejecting his happily ever after dolls.
"Do you want to know who your wife will be?"
He smirked at her question. A year ago, he would have doubled down on that answer. So much had changed since the love of his life dumped him on the beautiful Hawaiian shore. It seemed like a lifetime ago that he'd thought he'd be living the dream in his newly purchased home in Pacific Palisades with Lauren. College sweethearts, Drew had finally proposed 9 years later. 9 years. Lauren didn't deserve his inability to commit. He knew that now and wondered why she'd stayed with him for as long as she did. As they approached their 10-year anniversary, she'd pretty much told him they were getting married. She'd even suggested they wed in the spot where they'd met all those years ago during spring break in Hawaii. He liked that idea and finally took the plunge, starting with a romantic proposal. He smiled, remembering the look on her face when she'd stepped into the room. Even though she knew the question was finally coming, the place he'd chosen caught her by surprise. Shortly after their engagement, an upscale wedding planning firm that catered exclusively to A-list clients was hired to plan the Hawaiian wedding in 3 weeks. They'd rushed it, but Lauren had been so patient that when she strongly suggested they marry that summer, he couldn't say no. And it wasn't so bad. He'd taken a lot of time off from work to join Lauren in Hawaii before the wedding, and Luke came along too. He and Lauren were well on their way to their happily ever after. That all changed when his wedding planner, Kate Ashby, decided to prove a point and smashed her lips into his on a Maui beach. Long story. And one he didn't want to relive anytime soon. The devastated look on Lauren's face when she'd caught him kissing Kate in the sand was not one he could ever forget. He had tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, that Kate had planted her lips on his to get to the bottom of which twin had kissed her silly on their initial plane ride to Hawaii. Kate suspected it had been Luke who had pretended to be Drew during the flight, but since Luke wouldn't admit to it, she needed to find her proof a different way. When the dust settled, his brother had finally admitted what he'd done. Kate forgave him, and now they were happily engaged. But Lauren hadn't been so understanding and refused to go through with their wedding. After a lot of apologizing, Drew finally convinced her that the kiss hadn't been instigated by him. Still, Lauren had seen other signs that he wasn't ready to walk down the aisle. She called him out on his cold feet, insisting that time apart was what they needed. It was true he'd had fears when it came to the wedding, but it had nothing to do with his love for Lauren. Deep down, he was afraid he wasn't capable of giving her the marriage and family life she deserved. He just hadn't expected she'd end things completely, and that move left him heartbroken. Shortly after their split, he made plans to head to Tokyo while she joined JDL Toys' New York headquarters as Luke's VP of marketing. They agreed to put their house on the market. Drew shifted in his chair, remembering the last time he'd seen Lauren. Before moving overseas, his brother had insisted he spend 1 week in the New York office to meet with key stakeholders. He knew better. His brother was very vocal that Drew royally messed up and that he should tell Lauren how much he loved her before it was too late. Lauren, however, didn't seem to be fazed that he'd be leaving soon. Her behavior toward him that week had been collegial at